This is about Elizabethan government. So basically, government from Elizabeth's ascension to the throne in 1558 to her death in 1603. I'm going to be evaluating the successes and the failures. So yeah, let's begin. So first, let's look at the methods of rule. She had a huge coronation, which made her look like a religious figure, not a goddess, but close to God. She was her jewelry, it was really a huge deal. Her coronation was a huge deal. Yeah, it literally made people say, "Wow, that's her queen. She has to be sent by God." There was a divine right of kings, not really, but that idea that the king was chosen by God. So to further this idea, she had loyal supporters in the key positions like the royal household, the court, and general government institutions. And nobles could be in all three of them. Like Leicester, he was in the household, he was in the court, and he was leader of government institutions all around the country, which was basically what you needed to have for dynastic survival. You need to have friends. You can have yes men, because having too many people who just said yes to everything you did is not good. You need advisors. You need people you can trust. Even though they may disagree with you, you need people you can trust. That's like, if you want to be a king or queen, you need that. Also, there were other government institutions like Privy Council and Parliament, which were centralized, increasing Elizabeth's control. Parliament by this time was divided into the House of Commons and the House of Lords. So I think that today it's still like that. I don't really know the structure, but yeah. And there were talented individuals in government like Cecil, Walsingham, Mildmay, and Hatton, which were really experienced. So that was a success. It's like for the methods of ruling and a bit of an overview, that was quite good. I mean, it wasn't that good by the end of her reign. By the 1590s, she was older. She couldn't use flirting techniques to keep control over men before, although men did pretend to be enamored with her, but no, she didn't make men fall in love. So her methods didn't work as well. I'm going to get into that later, but there was so much rivalry and factionalism, especially between Cecil and Leicester, and then Cecil's son and the Earl of Essex, which, by the way, was the son-in-law of Leicester. It's just all related. But yeah, there was a lot of factionalism, especially by the end, and nobles lost their cool in a way. The Earl of Essex, he was really close to Elizabeth, and he was one of her favorites. But then he lost his temper, got mad, and ended up losing his head. And that's not what you want. So that was the methods of rule. I'm gonna get into more detail now. First, let's look at the central government. Elizabeth had to be a part of government to be successful. She couldn't be like her father. Henry VIII wasn't that much involved in government. He left it all to Wolsey, Moore, and Cromwell. And look how that turned out. So she wanted to be an effective ruler. She needed to be there, like right at the center, which she was. So that was really good. She had the traditional conservative aristocracy reduced with the execution of Norfolk, or the death of the High Treasurer Winchester made it so that the old conservative aristocracy wasn't that present in English politics by this point. It was cohesive decision making by the council, which this doesn't mean that there wasn't factionalism, no, but it's not that one member of the council thought one thing and then the other member thought one thing and then it was everywhere. Everyone thought differently. There were factions, like people did agree on things, but it's just they didn't agree, and it wasn't unanimous. Some things were, but most things weren't. And almost nothing is unanimous these days and old days. It's hard to get things done if there's a lot of people. I'm gonna get into that in a bit. So the structure of our government prevented factionalism in the early stages. Like I said, if you look at her government, there wasn't that much factionalism. before like the mid, like during the golden age, there wasn't factionalism. Further on, yes, but I'm gonna get into that. And no, like I said, no single minister was in charge of patronage. There was no alter rex. There was no single most powerful person apart from the king, the queen. It's just Elizabeth, and then other ministers. But you can't compare anyone in Elizabeth's government to Wolsey or to Northumberland in for Edward's reign, or Somerset by that matter. You can't. The closest person I think comes like that is Cecil, but even him, he wasn't that powerful. Members needed each other. They couldn't just be individually like thinking one thing and the other person thinks another. No, they need to cooperate, which promoted working along and agreeing. Although there's two sides to everything, so factionalism again. But they did cooperate a bit. It was a small Privy Council. I don't remember the exact number. Well, I think there is a number. I'm gonna get into that later. I think there's a number, but I don't remember right now. It was easy to coordinate, and if there's fewer people, there's a higher chance they'll agree than if there's 30 people in the Privy Council. It's gonna be really confusing. If there's like 10, that's gonna be kind of easy. Although factionalism again, factionalism is just the worst thing about Elizabeth's reign. But I'm gonna get into that in a bit. Like I said, that was a good thing about central government. Then about the bad things, there were disputes like foreign policy, and especially the execution of Mary Queen of Scots in 1587. That caused huge tensions between Elizabeth and her Privy Council. That was really a mess in English politics then. Ministers kept dying of old age. And the problem is Elizabeth didn't replace them that quickly. She let a bit of time go by, and if that minister is missing, someone's gonna either take the opportunity or just take over the post directly, and that's just gonna increase factionalism, and it's just gonna make things worse. So she should have, as soon as the minister died or whatever happened, she should have just had someone in mind. Although, like William Cecil, when he died, his son Robert Cecil took over. When Leicester either died or left, I don't remember, his son-in-law took over, the Earl of Essex. But other posts weren't filled as quickly. There were senior noblemen were absent, and there were the promotions or either members just plain refusing to retire. That caused resentment. If there's a member of Privy Council who's just useless, they should just retire. Why wouldn't they resign? Because they wanted power. All the members are like, you're taking up space, and you don't agree with me, and I want someone there who agrees with me. So why are you leaving? Or why did this guy get promoted when I'm much better? Like the promotion of Robert Cecil over Essex. They had a bit of a disagreement, and by a bit I mean a huge thing. But like I said, factionalism is a separate thing that I'll get into in a while. It's just factionalism in Elizabeth's reign is just fascinating. So I'm gonna get into local government now. The good thing is Lord Lieutenants, they controlled local militia and were mostly from the Privy Council, so trustworthy men. So not too bad. The Justice of the Peace, who were in Tudor government, they were present with Henry VII. They're there from the beginning. There was constant communication between the regional and the central government. I mean, it's not like the Justice of the Peace could just walk over to the Queen, but there were like stepping stones to the Queen, and it was kind of easy to communicate rather than just leave it to a local lord or something. And she rewarded other people, like Justice of the Peace and other gentry members, which promoted loyalty and obedience. If you were good and you behaved according to what the Queen said, and you could handle responsibility, she could give you a higher political post, which would have brought along more money, and also you had a good relationship with the Queen. So if you ever needed a favor, when the Queen, you had a higher chance of getting that done. So just that promoted really good relations with normal people, which is like them and Elizabeth. That doesn't mean there weren't rebellions. There definitely were. And the royal prerogatives, she asserted her dominance. She mostly used that in the issue with marriage. Elizabeth never married. She became known as the Virgin Queen, although the term virgin I don't think applies. She probably had so many lovers, but I mean it's a queen. She probably had, but she never married because she said once that she was married to England, and she didn't need a man. There were pretenders, like there were people who wanted to marry her, but she just didn't. That's an issue I'm going to get into in a bit, but yeah. And the Wales, there was the Council of Wales, Welsh marches, yeah. The borders were relatively safe, and they were included in the court. And the Bible and the Book of Common Prayer was in Welsh. So generally, Wales and England, they retained good relationship. However, it wasn't that successful in terms of local government because we can't deny poverty. At the beginning, poverty was reduced thanks to the reforms put in place by Mary, which Elizabeth benefited from, which I said in my previous video about government in Edward and Elizabeth and Mary's reign. But her reforms benefited Elizabeth. And at the beginning, it wasn't that bad. As the reign went on, poverty started to increase, and there was discontent with the Elizabethan government, leading to the Essex Rebellion, which did not end well for Essex. Off his head. So, oh, this is a good thing. This is the juicy part. The Privy Council and the key members, they met regularly, and there was, like I said, cohesive decision making despite personal changes. Oh yeah, here it is. I knew there was a number. By 1597, there were only 11 members in the Privy Council. 11. But the thing is, a lot of ministers died, and really quickly, it's like they got into the post and died. It's just one minister died, and then a few months later, another minister died because of old age. People in the Privy Council were old men, and by old, I don't mean 90. I mean like old by those days. I think Walsingham died really old. Like even by today's standards, he not really, but kind of old. It's an achievement by in the 16th century, dying of in your 80s. That's a good. You've lived a good life. Anyway, the Queen just, like I said, she didn't replace members immediately. She relied on former councillors who and their children who weren't as good. Maybe the fathers were amazing, but then the children not quite. And Cecil, Essex. And there weren't senior noblemen in the council, like I said. They just weren't that experienced. And the whole Mary Queen of Scots fiasco, I'm not going to get into that I'm going to get into it in a bit of detail, but not much, because that's foreign policy. But it brought a lot of disputes. The council were begging Elizabeth to execute her, and Elizabeth's like, she's a queen, I can't really execute her. And then she eventually did the whole Babington plot. And then it said that Elizabeth signed a death warrant, but then regretted it, but it was too late. She got, right, Queen of Scots got executed, which I think it was yesterday. But in 1587. Obviously not yesterday. So I'm going to talk about factionalism. This is the cool part, the part I like the most. So there were so many topics members of Elizabeth's Privy Council disagreed over, so many topics. First of all, not the main one, but the most famous one, Mary Queen of Scots. In 1562, so this was 4 years after Elizabeth came to the throne, Elizabeth wanted to meet Mary. But the council's like, nope, you're not gonna. She's a Catholic queen living in France. You are a Protestant queen who's just been in the throne for 4 years. She's been technically Queen of the Scots since she was 6 days old. It's not like she had that much experience, but it's just not. This was not me. She wanted to meet her, yeah, and the Privy Council just didn't. So that caused tension. Settlement followers were constantly saying, "Please do something about this. Just don't let her gain power. Don't let her go to Scotland, because she was in France, married to Francis II at this point. And do something." While Leicester, who was the Queen's favorite and possibly her lover, he said, "Elizabeth, why don't you try to talk to Mary, come to an agreement? You're both queens in Europe, which by this time was, and kind of is right now, dominated by men. You should have good relationships with each other. Also, you share a land border. It can't hurt." However, that was in 1569, and then in 1586, there were some letters. There's a whole Walsingham deal. He uncovered some letters that made Mary complicit in a plot, the famous Babington plot, against Elizabeth. Elizabeth signed the death warrant for Mary, which resulted in her execution. So that was not fun. Now here is another one. In the first part of her reign, my first part, I mean until Cecil dies and Leicester leaves. It's all the Cecil faction versus Leicester faction, just polar opposites. By the way, Leicester is Robert Dudley. Leicester is his title. Leicester doesn't like Cecil at all. He thinks he's too noble. He's not noble, and he is too cautious. So there was a whole drama there. It's like, for me, ancient history, not ancient, there's nowhere near ancient. Medieval history is more like a huge TV show, like Game of Thrones kind of deal. It's just back and forth, disagreements and betrayal. I just really I love it because it's just a huge TV show, in my head. It's actual history. This actually happened. And that's why I love this history so much. Anyway, this was a whole about the Netherlands. The Netherlands were controlled by the Spanish, and there were Protestant areas in the Netherlands. This was before the whole Spanish Armada deal. Philip of Spain had attempted to marry. He had not proposed, but he had said, "Hey, Elizabeth, want to marry me?" And Elizabeth's like, "Nope." So there were tensions. Also, Spain, Catholic, England, Protestant, and yeah. So Spain and England did not get on well, especially after the Spanish Armada. I mean, during that, but after that, Spain and England didn't, not quite. So Leicester, he was the Queen's favorite, like I said, and he was a bit too ambitious because he was too close to the Queen. So Cecil took a bit of a. He didn't like Leicester very much. Like I said, he wasn't Leicester. He wasn't Cecil's favorite. There was factional disputes. Cecil-led faction versus the Leicester led faction. Cecil wanted to avoid war. He wanted to avoid war with Spain. They're just like, nah, send troops. Cecil, who had a lot more experience, he's urged caution, like, don't get yourself too involved in a necessary conflict. Just let the people in the Netherlands just sort it out. Leicester's like, no, send troops right now. Go fight the Spanish. Now. It took Elizabeth 7 years to decide she would send troops. 7 years. I mean, talk about procrastinating, am I right? Leicester, he was born into his position. Cecil gained it through his work. and ability. He just worked all the way from not from the bottom, but he wasn't. If it stayed where he was at the beginning of his life, he would never have gotten where he ended up. So this just shows that there was no alter X. There was no person who just said to Elizabeth, "Hey, do this," and Elizabeth's like, "Okay." No. It took a while for Elizabeth to look at her options. Which you could look at this both ways. You could say it was good because she took her time, she measured her options, and said, "Okay, I'm just gonna side with Leicester, not because he's my favorite, but because he has the best options out there." But also, it's just you could look at it saying it was unsuccessful because she couldn't decide what to do. There was too many things. I mean, depends on how you want to look at it, but you could bend it both ways. So then there's the whole thing with marriage. This is a huge one. Elizabeth, she invoked her royal prerogative, and usually this isn't discussed by the Privy Council, but it became a matter of discussion by the Privy Council. There were so many people who were were proposed to Elizabeth. That's not the right word, but you know what I mean. Also, at one point, when Elizabeth had smallpox at the beginning of her reign, not at the beginning, but early into her reign, they thought she would die, and she appointed Leicester as her successor, which really cautious sentiment, which again displayed how you couldn't have not only Leicester because he was the Queen's favourite, obviously, but you can have an English nobleman being king, because that would create so much factionalism and a rebellion. You were guaranteed a rebellion if you married an Englishman. So, in 1567, the Archduke Charles of Austria was proposed to marry Elizabeth. In 1579 to 81, the French Duke of Alizon. I probably butchered that, but a French Duke. Leicester probably wanted to marry Elizabeth, so he disapproved of both of them. He said they were not suitable. There were better candidates. In reality, it would reduce his power because he wouldn't be as close to the Queen. There would be another man, but also it would mean Elizabeth wasn't single anymore. By the way, Leicester, he was married. His wife died under suspicious circumstances. He married again, but I think the wife fell down some stairs. It's debated as to whether she committed suicide, someone else did it, or Leicester did it, or Elizabeth did it. It's either Elizabeth did it, or Leicester did it to get into favor with Elizabeth, or she committed suicide. I don't think there was anything else in play. Cecil, he approved of both of them. Like, it's wise, marry for example, I think the French Duke could have been a good option because he is a French Duke, a Catholic country. I mean, he wouldn't be the king, but still. You have an ally in France. So this Duke, it caused a lot of public unrest. So it was the best candidate by far, but Elizabeth either didn't want to marry him because she wanted to calm the public unrest, or she didn't want to marry him because she didn't want to marry, or she only wanted to marry Leicester, but Leicester couldn't really marry her. More drama. And kind of same thing happened with the Austrian Duke, but not really. It was the French Duke that was caused more drama. So then comes another dispute. This is more towards the end of her reign. Cecil has died, and sadly Leicester, I don't know if he died, if he just disappeared, but it's just Essex, Dudley's son-in-law, and Robert Cecil, William Cecil's son. So Essex, he was very arrogant, he was jealous, he was incompetent. He wasn't at the beginning the favorite of the Queen, but Elizabeth obviously didn't like him as much as Dudley. Dudley was definitely her fave. Cecil just replaced his dad and was kind of similar in personality. He exploited patronage to weaken Essex's influence and strengthen his own faction. So when Essex was admitted into the council in 1593, he did kind of a secret negotiation with James V to form a Protestant coalition against Catholics. not James the Fifth. This would be James the Sixth. Yeah. He formed a secret negotiation with a king from a Protestant coalition against Catholics. By this point, yeah. Anyway, he formed a coalition against Catholics. But Cecil's faction with Lord Clapham and Walter, I think it's Sir Walter Raleigh, one of the key members, especially in he was no, that's a Francis Drake. No, he was a key member in Elizabeth's circle. Cecil wanted to make peace with Spain. They had made peace with France. That was all good. No one needed to touch that. France was okay. Spain, on the other hand, not quite. Think about it. The Spanish Armada had been 8 years before that, so the tensions were so high, and the appointees Essex put in the Privy Council, they were just overlooked by Cecil's faction. And then one day in 1601, Essex just burst into the Queen's chamber, just told Elizabeth, there was a disastrous military campaign in Ireland, and she had to renew the patent for his monopoly on sweet wine. She had to do that right now. And then there was a whole rebellion thing. But he entered into the Queen's chamber, which you really, really don't want to do. Of course, that ended up, not only that, but the whole rebellion thing, he was obviously punished for bursting into Elizabeth's chamber, but what really, that and the rebellion cost him his head. He was tried and executed, and by this point, 1601, the Queen isn't really that important. I mean, they needed her approval, but it was more the councillors. I wouldn't say it's, again, a Wolsey kind of deal, but it was more about collaboration, and factionalism took over. And in 2 years' time, Elizabeth would die, so it's not like that had that big of a consequence. Then the last part is Parliament. Parliament, Elizabeth's reign, okay, 1558 to 1603, Parliament only met 13 times, but passed 438 acts, so quite a few. The most important task, this was like throughout the whole Tudor period, it was to grant extraordinary revenue to the crown. Overall, it wasn't that, I wouldn't say it's not important. No, the Parliament definitely was important. I wouldn't say it's just that big a deal. It's just more grant her money than anything else. She used means of communication, a clear point of contact between councillors and those who administered the localities on her behalf. But there was a constant failure to reform the system of taxation. So throughout her reign, the yield of extraordinary revenue just declined. And Elizabeth became increasingly irritated with Parliament. It's not like they were, like I said with Mary, it's not like they were Charles I levels of hatred, King of Parliament, but still, it wasn't a friendship per se. So yeah, that was Elizabeth's government. So overall, you have to assess if it's successful or not. They did get things done, but there was factionalism. So I would say, in terms of keeping control of the country, good. In terms of her own power, no. Because if she had enough power, she could have just kept the Privy Council together, prevent factionalism. And local government-wise, that was really good. She handled it really well. Central government-wise, excluding Parliament, not quite. I mean, Parliament is a whole another deal. But yeah, it's the Privy Council, I think, is the most important thing in Elizabeth's reign. And it just shows with all the factionalism, Cecil and Leicester, and later on, Cecil, the other one, and Essex. It's just constant infighting. And you can't really get that much done. So she was really that. I don't say she was a bad monarch. No, she was a really good one. That she was the great Elizabeth. she would have been able to control her people. So, yeah, I mean, the most important thing out of Elizabeth's government is just the factionalism, the constant disputes. Cecil, Leicester. I mean, Cecil and Essex, also important, but not quite. Cecil and Leicester, they were there right from the beginning and almost lasted until the end, except one died and the other one left and then died. So yeah, I think that sums it up. There's not really that much else to go on. So yeah, thank you for watching.